Hello everyone and welcome to the Online Hustle podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Kian Golzari, who's probably one of the best product developers out there. In this episode, he's going to go through everything you need and all the requirements that you have to source that perfect product that you want to create. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Online Hustle podcast. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Kian Golzari. Kian, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks very much for having me. Super excited to be here.
Hey, thank you so much for being on. I'm quite excited about this one because I had the pleasure of meeting you in person and we were in Milan. We had a few ice creams. It was a special time those couple of days.
You actually treated us to a very nice ice cream. You bigged it up over dinner the whole time. You're like, guys, you got to try this place. And took a squad of like 10 of us over and everyone was like, this better be good, but it did live up to the expectations. So thank you very much for that.
I remember you had the biggest tub of ice cream I've ever seen and you finished it.
Chocolate thing, yeah.
Very impressive. We'll go straight into it. My whole point of this episode is to kind of create a journey for the listeners from the very start to the very end, whether it's from the sourcing from your own story or from the overall sourcing and product development story that you have. So the very first question that I have for you is, if someone asks you, what do you do for a living? And, what is it how do you describe yourself? How would you go about that?
It's a very good question. I would say I strive to develop the best products in the world. I'm a product developer at heart and I've been involved in this for over 13 years. I went to China for the first time in 2010 and luckily the first factory that I went to was a backpack factory, and when I went into that factory, like, my mind was blown. And the reason was that, when you think of a backpack, you think of it just like in a store on a shelf, one unit, that's a piece, cool, I'll buy it. But when you see it in a factory, you see it in like 30 different pieces. Like, you see the shoulder straps, the foam that goes in the shoulder straps, like the webbing, the buckles, the zippers, the pullers, the fabrics, inside lining, the waterproof coating, and you see it step by step getting assembled. And then now all of a sudden, when you want to develop a backpack, your mind goes to like 30 different places. It's like you think in 3D. And then I just became obsessed with that. And then that led on to developing over 2,500 different products. So anytime like I see a product in a shelf or within an e-com store or whatever, just my mind just goes crazy. And that's just product development at heart. And then as a result of that, it sort of led to diving deep into supply chain and things like that. But yeah, at heart, I would say I strive to be the best product developer in the world.
How interesting. And I'm guessing when you go around, you see anything on a shelf, you just break down piece by piece and try and understand what are the materials, what's going on, how the product is assembled itself.
No one wants to go shopping with me because
that surprised me, to be honest, it doesn't. You said about the backpack. As I said, I wanted to go something a little bit more personal about you. And I think Highlander Outdoor probably did. And as you mentioned in your social media content as well, that probably had a massive, effect to your life. How do you think, growing with that brand around you has affected the way you think?
Oh, honestly, I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world because I graduated university and stepped into a family business, Highlander, which my dad started, I think 35 years ago. And luckily, growing up, I always saw my dad going to China. When I was 5 years old, 10 years old, he was going into China. And that was when China was coming out of a communist rule and they were setting up factories for the first time. So my childhood was just hearing stories from my dad about what happens in China. So I just had this genuine curiosity of what goes on there. And the same way he's doing business with factory bosses, their children, which were same age as me at the time, would be coming over to Scotland. And I'm just and then now those kids are running the factory and I'm friends with them and they're like, hey, remember when we used to hang out when we were 5 years old? So really, really lucky that way. But when I graduated university, my dad was like, hey, do you want to take over the product development? And because I'd been exposed to it for quite a long time, and take over the supply chain of the business. So I was kind of fast tracked, just thrown straight into the deep end. And luckily I loved it. And that's why this is the first time I went to China, a few months later, I set up an office there and I moved there. And I was just so lucky to have that opportunity because I know that the normal career route would be go to university, study something, start at the bottom, work your way up. But I was lucky to have that mentoring growing up and then being able to have the backing to reveal my ideas through products in real time to a real business and then have great opportunities and then just build from there. So, and then obviously to have my dad's mentorship in that regard was so valuable as well. So I feel super lucky and blessed to have that opportunity.
Yeah, you can really tell your passion every time I've spoken to you about it. It's I think the listeners in this episode will also tell whenever you answer a question how beautifully detailed you're going to be. And it's something that I've experienced firsthand. And I'm going to start testing it just about now, where we start going to the nitty gritty about sourcing and product development. Now, in terms of the title of this episode is questions. It is, how do I implement my next big idea? Okay, so from experience, I would say it's all about, to start with, it's about the research, right? So luckily, especially on an e-commerce basis, there's so many tools that actually help you understand what is selling well and what isn't. For example, Helium 10, Jungle Scouts are great software that actually have pretty much every e-commerce seller should use to have done and do that research to start with.
Yeah.
Now, from your experience as well, I know for a fact that you mentioned Alibaba as being that amazing platform that is there for any business to start doing that research and looking at potential products and potential manufacturers, whether it's e-commerce, looking at developing a brand, or actually just buying something that your business needs. For example, my father, working in the property development industries, he went and ordered his elevators and lifts from China, and they're the best elevators. He says they're the best product that he's ordered, and he obviously working in Sri Lanka, for example, as a country where everything is imported. Those are the best products going on, and I'm going to mention later how the quality of those made in China products have changed over the few years. But the question number one actually is, when researching potential manufacturers to implement your idea, what are the key facts that you look out for when finding that best possible option?
Yeah, great question. There was actually quite a few questions in there, because when you started off with the product research, well, mine started going into like product research analysis.
Yeah, I know. With you have to be really targeted. So let's go through the manufacturers right now.
Okay, cool. So if we start with manufacturers, right, the main things that I look for, and Alibaba, I just want to be clear, is a fantastic resource. That's kind of like a starting point. There's like other platforms and other things that I use, which I can get into, but I always start with Alibaba just because it's got such a large database of factories and information, and that's where I'm going to start my research. So first of all, if anyone is like listening to this or hearing me for the first time, and they're like, right, I've got this product idea and I want to figure out how to align with the best manufacturers to develop this product, their go-to is probably Alibaba.com. But I've seen a lot of people make mistakes on Alibaba.com, not because it's a bad platform, but because they don't know how to use it properly. The typical person, if you go to Alibaba.com right now, as soon as you log on, you'll see two options. There'll be price. You can search by product and you can search by manufacturers. And if you search by product, let's just say you're typing in outdoor furniture camping chair, right? And then you hit that, and then all the results come down, and you'll see outdoor camping chairs, which will be $5.80, $8, $12, $16, $4. But all the chairs look kind of similar, right? They're all kind of like similar size. They fold. They've got like steel tubing, and the consumer must be so confused to be like, they all look very similar, but one's $4 and one's $16. Which one do I go for? Oh, like I'll go for this one because it's the cheapest one. And then that's when like quality problems happen. My whole process is, you have two tabs at the top. You can search by products or manufacturers. Always search by manufacturers, because the purpose of Alibaba, in my opinion, is to find the absolute best suppliers. Once you find the best suppliers, then you can negotiate the price and get into the nitty gritty and things like that. But I want to align with the best partner first. So I search by manufacturers. Then the next thing, once you hit that, and now you type in outdoor camping furniture chair, at the top of the screen, the first thing that will show up is, I would always select verified suppliers. And verified just means it's been verified by a third party. So Intertech, SGS, TUV, there's all these third party companies. And what they do is they go into the factory and they analyze, right, how many production lines do you have? How many square meters is your factory? How many workers do you have? What testing equipment do you have? And then they go in and they verify all that information. So like if we click on any factory profile and it says we have 150 workers, well, a third party has gone in and verified that. But if we weren't to select verified manufacturers, then whatever they say, if it's 500 workers or 50 workers, we have no idea if it's true or not. It's not been verified by anyone. So that's the next thing. And then after that, I would go down and select trade assurance. And trade assurance just means your payment is protected. So if you order a red camping chair, but you receive a blue one, well, Alibaba will refund you because you selected that trade assurance. And then as you scroll down the left, further down, you'll have a tab that will say management certification, and that's just a certification that the factory holds. And I would always select ISO and BSCI, which are just two well-known like sort of quality standards for a factory. And then after that, that's now like filtered your list. So the factories that we're now looking at should be very, very good factories to engage with. Now, for something like an outdoor camping chair, I would imagine you would get like 10, 15, 20 pages of results. So we still need to narrow this down. So as I'm scrolling down that list, the first thing I look at is the first word in the company name, because the first word is either the city or the province in which that factory is located. And normally in China, like the factories are all located in like the same region for that particular product. So for example, electronic products are normally made in Shenzhen, like backpacks, just because I know, are made in like Chenzhou. And then like for outdoor camping chairs, it'll most likely be an area called Yongkang, because Yongkang is really like famous for steel. But then it could also be like Ningbo and Hangzhou, because you've got fabrics and textiles. So you'll see a mixture of the both. But as I'm scrolling down, I want to see like what name pops up the most, and then that's kind of the region that specializes in the product. And then underneath the company name, it also says like, it will say 5 years, 10 years, 12 years. That's the number of years that the company has been registered on Alibaba.com. So I don't necessarily want to work for a factory. It just says 1 or 2 years. I don't want them to be new to this whole exporting thing. I kind of go for like 5 years and above. So just that simple process of searching by manufacturers, selecting verified, selecting trade assurance, selecting ISO and BSCI, looking at the first word in the company name, and then looking at the number of years the factory's been in business, that is like now filtered your search. And honestly, like I explained that in a little bit of time, but that takes 30 seconds to tick those boxes. And then now you're aligned with amazing manufacturers, and then you can begin your journey. I could talk about this for like another half an hour, but I just want to kind of break it down into the key principles.
No, actually, what I was about to say is how incredibly simple you make it sound, because I think with the amount of entries there are on Alibaba, the amount of manufacturers, it can be overwhelming. Another misconception, I talk about misconceptions on this podcast quite a lot, because other misconception that comes up with going and sourcing on and looking at products on Alibaba and communicating with manufacturers on Alibaba is actually the language barrier, which from experience, I've actually not experienced at all, where like most manufacturers have set themselves up in a way where they have, great English communicators, especially for English businesses, to communicate with, and they actually reply to you very promptly, and they're actually judged on Alibaba with their response times as well. So it's in their best interest to speak the language of the business and try and have that communication and deal with the business accordingly.
For sure. Can I give a quick tip around that, right?
Yeah.
Because what we just talked about was how to find the best manufacturer.
Yeah.
That's like half the job. The next is how do you communicate with that supplier, right? Because I think rightly or wrongly, a lot of people have taken like, I don't know, e-commerce courses or like watch YouTube videos, not mine, of course, but they've been wrongly advised in terms of like how to engage with a manufacturer. And I see like a lot of people just say, hey, this is a product we're interested in. What's your best price? What's your MOQ? And can I have customized packaging? Like you have to remember that supplier probably receives 50 to 100 inquiries a week. And you've just sent them the same message that we've got from 50 other people. So there's no incentive for them to now reach out, help you, for that one to go top of the pile. And they can kind of name any price that they want. So the first message that I would write is always like 3 parts. One, I want to introduce myself, the company, and why I'm going to be a big customer for you. The second part is going to be why I selected you as a factory, what I really like about your factory. And the third is I'm just going to give a little bit of detail about the product that I want priced up. So, you can talk about, hey, I've been in manufacturing for like 10 years. I've built these brands, we've built these Amazon stores, and now we're launching this product. We're going to launch the same success we've had with other e-commerce stores. But let's say you're a beginner, day one, you're just getting started in e-commerce, and you're like, well, I don't have all of that background and expertise. You can sort of leverage your information and your knowledge about the product. So let's say, for example, your first product is a yoga mat. Not the one that I would recommend, but just as an example, right? Yeah. So I would say, hey, I've been a yoga instructor for like 14 years. I have my own yoga studio. I have so many new ideas about how to innovate and develop a product. I have access to the biggest influencers, and in China, they call them KOLs, key opinion leaders. I've got access to the biggest KOLs in the industry. So when we launch, we were going to launch with a lot of attention and audience. And then they're like, okay, cool. Like now I know about you. I know your vision. I know you're passionate about this product. I know you've got new ideas, and I know you've got an audience to sell these products. Great. Then the second part is all of that stuff that we just talked about in terms of finding the factory, right? Now, when you click on that factory's profile, and because it's verified, we know all this is true. We're going to see like what certificates they have, how many production lines they have, which markets they export to. Like they break down all of that. And I would just use the information that I see on their factory profile to say, it's great that you have the ISO and BSCI certificate. That means that you place a great importance on quality, and high quality is one of the core values of our company. It's great to see that you've been exporting products for more than 15 years. It shows that you have a lot of experience. I've also been in the yoga business for more than 15 years, so I know we're going to have a lot in common. It's great to see that you supply that 60% of your exports go to the North American market. North America is also our market, so I'm really happy that you're familiar with the standards of the market that we're going to be selling in. And that is telling the factory, you actually took the time to find us, read our profile, highlight what you like about us, and then tell us that. So it's like, you've not just like randomly found our company profile, like you've actually studied us and you want to work with us. And then the final part would be that like you have to have some sort of specification sheet or tech pack or like one page or PDF, nice and simple, the product that you're interested in. Here's the product, here's the dimensions, here's the material, here's the packaging that we want. If you know that already, and then submit that, and then just say to the factory, like, here's my introduction on me, here's what I like about you, here's the product. It'd be great if you could send us your best price. I would never ask a factory, like, what's your MOQ? Because a minimum order quantity for anyone who doesn't know, because now you're like boxing yourself into like to be at the mercy of the quantity that the factory give you. I wouldn't even mention the quantity. I just say, what's the price? And then they would ask you, well, how many do you want to order? And like, let's say the actual MOQ is like 800 pieces, but I only want to trial it and do like 200 pieces. I'm just going to say, I only want to do 200 pieces as the first trial order. But because I've explained about who I am and what I do, in their mind, they're like, this is a customer that we want to acquire, because the supplier's not thinking how much money am I going to make from this order. They're thinking about how much money am I going to make from this customer over the next 3, 5, 10 years. And if you explain like long-term partnership, vision, like product development, why I like you, why I'm good, now they're like, okay, let's just break even on the first order. Let's give them what they want. Let's tick all the boxes for them. And then the next orders will grow and build together. But if I didn't explain that, if I asked for 200 pieces, they would say, forget it. And they would move on to the next customer. So the wording that we use is so important.
I like that. Because basically, I think from your perspective, it's a two-way street. It's not just because myself as a business going to Alibaba, I expect to be serviced the way I want. It's a two-way street where it's actually a business partnership, right? So you can't just expect for any manufacturer to do exactly what you say. It has to be like a two-way street where you've done the research, you know what they want, you know how to build that relationship. And I really appreciate that. I think that's a really, really good tip to for any business, really. I still wanted to, there's a bit of a random question in there, I'd say. Do you think for businesses that don't necessarily speak English or Mandarin or Cantonese in this case, have a disadvantage sourcing products on Alibaba?
No, not at all, because at the end of the day, by the way, you know, a lot of these Alibaba profiles, these companies have a lot of different languages outside of like English as well. Like if you go to any Alibaba profile, quite often they like list languages that the customer service team speak as well. So, but let's say they don't. Let's just say they only speak English and Mandarin, and let's say you're Italian, right? Which I know you would do very well in. but you know, you can also just say like, there's like translation apps and things like that, which is fine. But ultimately, what makes them want to work with you is the brand and the size of the volume of order that you're talking about, the type of business that you want to build, and they'll work around it. Like they might even hire someone Italian in their company to translate or to work with you. But it's so simple. Like even I use like WeChat a lot for communication with Chinese suppliers, and I was trying to get a Zoom call with a supplier yesterday. It was a new supplier, and they didn't have Zoom downloaded on their phone, but their English wasn't the best, and they were sending me messages in Chinese of what Zoom was telling them. Yeah. And I was just like using WeChat Translate on my phone to see like when they could join the meeting and things like that. So there's so many like easy functions now available to us that can like translate. But obviously the best advantages would be when we're able to sort of speak in the language that we want. And ultimately on top of that, to get the best results is just by going there as well. Like all this online communication is great, but like the best results happen when you visit the factories in China.
Absolutely. I mean, messages, never mind in this, but on a personal base as well, messages can be misinterpreted so easily. So I appreciate what you're saying. I say that with a potential dream of going to a Canton Fair.
Yeah.
So it is one of my definitely life goals, and I'm definitely planning on going as soon as possible. So I'll talk to you about that on a different day, I'd say.
The next Canton Fair, for anyone who doesn't know, is in October. They've got 3 phases, and they've got every single category of product you can possibly imagine. And it's over 26,000 suppliers, and they've got like under one roof. You can save so much time and development costs just by going there. Like, let's say I wanted to develop a backpack. There's a hall full of bag suppliers, but these are bag suppliers for sport bag, fashion bags, outdoor bags, luggage, like every category you can imagine, right? And then you can just go touch and feel the product, discuss the ideas, discuss the samples, meet the suppliers, build the relationships. And kind of what you touched on, Piero, like relationships is so important. And let's say, for example, someone isn't able to get out to China. Maybe they've already got a full-time job, they've got family commitments and stuff like that. Building that relationship is still very, very important. And you can still do that without going to China. So I mentioned an application called WeChat, which is like the Chinese messenger or WhatsApp. It's just what it uses for communication, but it's a little bit more than that. But you can literally download the WeChat app, say to your supplier, hey, what's your WeChat ID? And keep all the important information and communication to email, like delivery date, cost, product, all that sort of stuff. But on WeChat, just be like, hey, how was your weekend? What did you get up to? I went to the game with my buddies. We were at this Arsenal game where we won the Community Shield. And here's us having some beers and all that. Like, oh, I wish you could join us next time. And then they'll start sending you photos of what they're up to and stuff like that, and just communicating like informally through WeChat. I've helped some of my suppliers' kids' English homework through WeChat. They're like, hey, my son Tony doesn't understand this problem. Can you like solve it for him? I'm like, yep, Tony, say this, this, and this. And then like, so we have that connection, we have that relationship. But imagine like on WeChat, you can do photos and video calls and stuff like that. Let's say my goods are going to finish production on the 15th of October. I can call my supplier on WeChat on the 13th of October and say, hey, can you take the video down to the production line? I just want to see that all the goods are ready, finished, how they're packed, what the labels are. And then you now have eyes and ears inside the factory through the WeChat application, but you have to build that relationship first, right? But imagine you just communicated via Alibaba, like, hey, what's the price? What's the delivery date? Oh, cool, here's the payment. And if you're like, hey, can you just make a video for me of like going down to the factory? They're like, what? Like, you know what I mean? But because we have that friendship now, because we have the WeChat, because we have the relationship, you're boys, you know what I mean? Like your homies are cool. You can just go into the factory and just sort of see via video. So at the end of the day, people buy from people. So it's very, very important to build those relationships. They get really, really excited to have customers from all over the world with exciting stories, exciting backgrounds. So you just really want to hone in on that and develop that.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. I find that so interesting. Well, let's go back into that nitty-gritty part of thing where I want to go into more of the analysis side of things, because you've made such a good point on how to select your manufacturers now, on and how to speak to them and how to approach them. Now it's pre-order, actually selecting the supplier, the number one supplier that you want to work with. Okay, and on my question is about obviously how do you strike perfect balance in that relationship. On a personal basis, or on what I say to my clients, it has to be very analytical on terms of cost. I normally carry out product cost analysis for a client that needs to understand, okay, what is my final profit margin going to be when I finally source this product and I sell it? So there's a massive journey, and I'm miles ahead of myself here. But when it comes to the analysis side of things for you and selecting that perfect supplier for the type of brand or product that they're making, what are the key sort of features that you are looking for, and how to actually pick that perfect relationship? And the main reason why I asked that question, it's mainly because of cost. I'd say a lot of business will always pick the cheapest possible option, but I know you'll have the answer exactly why that's not necessarily the best answer.
Yeah, that was such a great question, and there was actually quite a few parts to that. But because we can talk about the costing analysis and why that's very important. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because so many people avoid that. You have no idea how many sellers that I've talked to that are like, yeah, I'm a 7-figure seller, but I'm like, yeah, but what's your profit margin? And they're like, and they can't answer it. And I'm like, it's crazy to me that someone can have $1 million plus business, but they don't know how profitable they are. Like that's actually very dangerous as well. So the costings part we'll get into. But in terms of like how to select that supplier, because, you know, we just talked about finding the best supplier. Now we've got like 10 different options, but how do I select the one to actually work with? One, it's important to align with the manufacturer that fits your brand, right? So let's say, for example, your brand is very eco-friendly, sustainable, all that sort of stuff. There'll be certain suppliers which specialize in recyclable materials, recyclable packaging, things like that. Okay, great. You understand like what we're about. That's a more suited partner for you. Now, also, we talked about that verified information, number of workers in the factory. If I'm, let's say, for example, an established business, my volumes are already very big, and I want to add a new product line, and I'm going into a new factory, a new product, but I want to order, you know, something relatively large, like, you know, 10, 15,000 units. I'm going to look at in the verified information, like how many workers you have in the factory. I'm not interested in the factories which have 20 workers because it's a relatively small operation. I'm looking for the factories which have got 2,000 workers because they've got very strict systems, procedures in place, right? And they have the ability to scale and make products quickly. Whereas if I've got a brand new product idea, innovation, it's never been done before, but I'm a new brand and I just want to do like 200 pieces, then I'm going to select the factories which have got, you know, 20 workers in the factory, right? Because, or if like, let's say it's a tech product and certification is very important, right? I'm going to select suppliers which have the necessary certification, and you can select the suppliers with certification for a particular product. Or if I'm going to be selling in North America, I want 70% of their exports go to North America, and all this information is available for you. So basically, whatever is my requirements for my product, my brand, my size, that information is there, and I want to align with those. But let's say we still have a few options, right? I go by like a system of like what I call like 10, 5, 3, 1. It's like a funnel, right? You got 10, you narrow down to 5, 3, and then 1. And that's like, I want to select my top 10 suppliers. And Alibaba has this function with a little star button. You can like favorite them. So I'm going to favorite like my first 10, right? I like what I see. Then I'm going to send that message, right? And by the way, that message was very like, sounded very customized, but you can almost copy and paste that message and send it to all 10 suppliers, but just change the bit in the middle, the second paragraph, which is what we like about that factory. Just change like the number of years in business or whatever it may be. So now we've selected the 10. Let's say we only get responses from like 7, but then there's like some which we really, really like. And some might say, oh, we can't do this, sorry. So I'll start from 10, I'll narrow down to 5. And then from 5, I'll select and order samples from 3. And then from the 3 samples that I receive, I'll place my order to 1. And a lot of people, I feel, just sort of order samples from one supplier and they place the order to them. But you need to have other samples from other suppliers to have something to compare to know what was the capabilities of the other suppliers for the price that you were quoted. Plus, over the last 3-4 years, China have had like a lot of issues, with like lockdowns, factory closures. But even before all that, factories used to get closed. Even when I was working with factories in 2012, like a factory would get closed for a month because their pollution emissions were too high. And if China had like a G7, G8 summit meeting, whatever, they would just shut down all factories for a month. They're like, we want the air to be clean for when the world leaders come in. And then they're off, right? Okay, turbocharge it up again. So like things like that just happen out with your control. So it's very, very important to have like a couple of backup factories, which you have a sample from them, you have a price from them, you have communication with them. So if your number one supplier, something happens to them, right, and they go off the radar, cool, no worries. I've got 2 other suppliers where I've got a sample and I've got a price. Here's your order, let's go. So I would kind of go by that 10, 5, 3, 1, and then that system will put you in very good shape to move forward in your supply chain with a lot of stability.
Perfect. It's exactly the answer. And I knew that you were going to do this to me, because my very next question was going to be ordering from, it was going to be about the sampling itself. And you've already mentioned it, but when you're looking to sampling, how often would you sample from different suppliers so you can actually compare different products?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I would say is that I've been involved in this e-commerce as an industry for a few years now. And the biggest mistake that I've seen people make in this industry is that they outgrow their supplier, meaning what's been really amazing in this Amazon industry is their ability to scale their business, right? And you see someone start off with an MOQ of like 200 pieces to then going to do like 8,000 units a month, right? But the same, like what got us here won't get us there. So the same supplier that you started with was that small factory willing to do your MOQ, probably charge you a slightly higher price, but they're not the factory to be making 8,000 units a month for you. So I would regularly, like, and it all starts with that specification sheet, all the information on our products. Like every time I feel like I've gone through a layer of growth, whether like my units have significantly increased or entered a new market or wherever it may be, I would always like do that exercise again that we talked about at the start. I'd find the best suppliers in Alibaba, select like maybe the top 3 to 5 suppliers, or go to China, meet them at the Canton Fair, give them either my sample or a specification sheet, and I'll just get them to price it up to be like, hey, for 10,000 units a month, how much would you charge us for this product? And then that quote, like let's just say the outdoor furniture chair, let's just say we're paying $8 for it, but now we're getting quotes for like $6.50. I wouldn't be like, okay, cool, here's your order, let's go. I would say to my existing supplier, I would always give them the chance to be like, hey, just so you know, other suppliers have been in touch with us. And this happens because like when you grow and scale your business, suppliers see your brand, they go on your website, they buy your product, they make a sample and they send it to you. That's happened to me so many times. Suppliers I've never heard of just made me samples and given me price quotations. So you can say to your existing supplier, hey, just so you know, other factories have quoted me $6.50 for the item that I'm buying from you. I would love to continue working with you. Everything's gone amazing so far, but I just want to give you the opportunity to match the price because I don't want to lose you as a supplier. And if they can match that price of $6.50, they're like, okay, cool, yeah, let's knock it down because the volumes are so much bigger now, right? So they'll be able to match the price. But if they're like, you know what, like we actually can't match that, like we don't have that scale, we don't have that infrastructure, then it's like, this has been a great journey. Like we're still going to work with you. We're still going to develop new products with you, but you understand that I now need to work with this other factory because our business is so competitive. So you're always, as you're growing, you're aligning yourself with the better suppliers. But I think your original question was about samples, and that is like using your samples, using your spec sheet to then align yourself with the best suppliers at the current time. But one really important thing is also like your sample process, meaning like, let's say you're starting this business from day one. I've seen so many like quality control mishaps, mistakes, errors that have cost people their business basically. But then I always ask them like, did you confirm a pre-production sample? No. Did you confirm a pre-shipment sample? No. Did you do a pre-shipment inspection? No. And I'm like, well, you never gave them like any sort of like instructions of what you accept and what you don't accept. So it's very, very, you can't really blame them. You can only really blame yourself. But very quickly, like the system is, you need a pre-production sample, meaning you have to have a sample in your hand that you're 100% happy with, that you're like, I'm now going to give you this purchase order and pay you this 30% deposit based on the sample that I have in my hands because I confirm this to go into production. And if you don't get that first time, keep making iterations until you get that sample that you're happy with. That is now your gold seal, your pre-production sample. Then they go off, they do the production. 60 days later, you get an email, hey, production's finished. Cool. Send me a sample from the production, which is called your pre-shipment sample. It's like before they ship it, it's a sample they're going to send. So you know, I've got my pre-production sample, which I confirmed you to go into production with. I've got my pre-shipment sample, which is what you've actually made, and they should be 100% the same. There should be no discrepancies. But if there's any issues with your pre-shipment sample, at least they can fix it while the goods are still in the factory and are at source. And some people might say, well, what if they just send you 2 perfect samples, but your production is actually something completely different? That's why we send in a pre-shipment inspection company. So a third party, Intertech, SGS, HQTS. I can recommend loads of companies. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I can suggest some good ones for you. And literally for $200, they go into your factory when the goods are finished and they look at all your goods, they check your production, they give you a 60-page report, all images, they scan your barcodes, they do the drop test, they check for your product's functionality, and then you give you a report to be like, yep, pass, good to go, or no, this inspection failed because there was a lot of scratch marks and dust marks on the product. And then you can use that information to be like, okay, cool, open them up, clean it up, and then we'll re-inspect it. Whatever it may be, you can take corrective action after seeing that report. But that sample process is so, so important. And when you think about the values of these orders, of like people are placing orders for $50,000, $80,000, $100,000, but they're not paying $200 for an inspection so they can sleep at night knowing that the goods that they're on water are fit for purpose. That would give me major anxiety, but it's so important. A really, really important part of the process.
Yeah, I remember this one particular horror story that you told me about, some boots. I clearly remember you telling me about this.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of those cases, right? Possibly the only one that you probably went through.
Yeah, and that's basically you learn from your mistakes. Like I had an issue of I had a factory that I was working with for like military boots, and we were working together for like many years. Everything was going smooth. We were doing pre-shipment inspections, everything passed, and I was like, you know what, we don't really need to do these inspections anymore because it's fine. Like they know what we want, and it passes every time. The products don't change. And then we did like two 40-foot high cube containers, like 20,000 like military boots that came over, right, for the army, and they all got, actually I've had two issues of this, but I think the one that we talked about was about the soles, right? And what happened was like the soles were like, I started to get a few returns, like, oh, the soles split, and then like next week like five returns, next week 10 returns, then like the shop's like returning everything, and I was like, what's going on here? And then what happened was that all the soles were splitting after walking like 2 or 3 kilometers in the boots. And what happened was that the supplier, the sole was supposed to have a 40% rubber content. To save a few cents, the supplier knocked it down to like 37% rubber content. But by having that inferior rubber content, the soles started splitting, and then all the goods were defective, everything got returned. But the value of this order is like 6 figures plus, just because the supplier wanted to make a few cent per unit. And that few cent per unit would have stacked up over the volume that we were doing. But a pre-shipment inspection report or doing a test with a third party would have solved that, because they have something like when you want to test a product for its functionality for the boots, one of them is called a flex test, and they literally just put the boot in a machine and it just flexes like that, like 10,000 times to simulate it walking 10,000 steps. And then afterwards to check the sole, like, all right, it's fine. On a waterproof jacket, they'll do a hydrostatic head test to put pressure of water through the fabric to see at what pressure does water come through the fabric, so they know how waterproof it is. There's so many different tests we can do. And for anyone, whatever product that you're in, whether it's electronic or baby or home or pet, you don't really have to know what these tests are, but you can contact like an Intertech or an SGS and say, hey, I'm importing these power banks from China to the US. What are the legal requirements I need to comply with that I need to test for? And then also, what are the industry standards that you would recommend? Because there's no legal requirements for a t-shirt to test for, but you might look at what are the industry standards, and they might do like a stretch test. They might do like a waterproof test. They might do like different types of testing that you can use. And these are all like selling points on your listing as well, right? Whatever test you comply with, you put that certificate, and you can say that we passed it, all these different standards. So the point is, sometimes mistakes happen. Sometimes it's our fault. Sometimes it's not our fault. And a pre-shipment inspection report will catch all of that, and it will save you a lot. And by the way, actually, there is a happy ending to that story, because they were a very, very good supplier, right? Meaning we done a lot of business together, and they were like, they put their hands up and they're like, you know what, we made a big mistake. We accept responsibility for this. We're going to remake the goods at our own expense, or we're going to ship this to you. So let's just say, for example, so $20 boot, 20,000 units, that's a $400,000 hit that the factory has taken, but they value the long-term, the business that we've placed already, and the business that we're going to have. And that was, 6 or 7 years ago. And think of all the orders that we've placed in the last 7 years, which have surpassed that, so that they've kept us as a customer. But that whole Alibaba process that we talked about at the start of the episode, aligning with credible, reliable, good people, building relationships, that's what saves you in situations like that. But if you never had that relationship, if you just sort of went with a supplier which had the cheapest price, and then you ask for them to remake those goods at their own expense, they'll be like, sorry, pal. You know what I mean? Like, delete contract.
Yeah. And on a business relationship, I think that's fair. That's what happens, right?
Yeah.
It's just how business works. But we finally come to, this sampling process, you've made it so detailed, which is great. And I think it's so important to do it simply because it kind of covers your back in many ways and make sure that you're covered. Now we come to ordering from that chosen suppliers, the chosen suppliers. Apart from the ordinary of setting up a contract, picking your quantities and ordering, and also I think there's the massive misconception, and I think this is one of the questions that you probably get asked the most, is how do I protect my design and my product? What are the key steps that a new business or existing business that is developing this new product has to really think about?
Yeah, great question. And I think that the first question I would ask myself is, I would be really, really self-aware of, do I actually need to protect this product? because a lot of people, especially beginners, like treat their first product as their baby of like, oh, like, hey, this is my product. I don't want anyone stealing or copying it. But then you have to ask yourself, like, how did you get the idea for that product? Did you invent this product, or did you see something else and did you just sort of add something, change the color, change the weight, change the feature? So like, is it worth protecting? That's the first thing. Because that's the nature of the game. Everyone just innovates on top of what is already out there.
Yeah.
And then after that, let's just say, for example, you haven't invented something of real value. It's never been done before. I'm like, right, I don't want anyone to copy this. What if my supplier copies me? And there's like contracts, like NNN agreements and stuff like that, non-disclosures and stuff like that. I've only had suppliers sign an NNN agreement once, but I never get suppliers to sign that, because what we talked about in terms of like building relationships and things like that, it's like, hey, I trust you're going to be a very good supplier for me and we get on really, really well, but I don't trust you're not going to copy my product, so I need you to sign this contract. Like, you're not setting your sort of relationship off on the best foot. Now, if your product idea is worth protecting, the best form of protection you can do is not necessarily against your supplier. It's just by getting a design patent or a utility patent on your actual product. So a design patent typically costs you around $4,000, utility patent around $15,000. And the design is like actually patenting the design of the product, and then utility is patenting like the function of the product, right? And if that is a very, very good form of protection, because it stops like other people copying your product. And also, if you're worried about your supplier might copy your product, then that's the best form of protection. But if you're not willing to pay the $4,000 to like protect your product idea, then maybe it wasn't that innovative in the first place. So you do have that option available to you. Now, the other thing is that's really, really important is that, let's say, for example, we've invented a new product, like let's just say the electric toothbrush, which now brushes your teeth on 2 rows. It's never been done before, but I need to find a supplier for it. And the process I just talked about, like 10-5-3-1, sending them your specification sheet, only one supplier is actually going to make this product, but 10 of them are going to see my idea, which are not going to make it. So nine won't make it and 1 will, but those 9 have now seen my product idea and I don't know what they're going to do with it, even if I patent my product or not, right? They might figure out a way around it. So in that case, if you do have something really, really innovative, and let's just say it's this electric toothbrush, I would just make like a dummy spec sheet, like a basic version of just a normal electric toothbrush, to find the best electric toothbrush manufacturer, see who's got the right certifications, number of years in business, factory size, all that stuff that you're happy with. Then get the samples from 3 of, right, they make a great quality electric toothbrush, their price is fantastic, their communication is amazing, they speak Italian. And then you actually order your sample and you're like, okay, this is a supplier I want to work with. This is my number 1 favorite. And then that number 1 favorite, then I would show them my product and idea and innovation, so that only the one which actually manufactures your product gets to see your product idea. And then that's like the best form of protection at the idea stage, sample development stage, and then the patent at when you actually want to like launch and sell your product as well. And patents can be expensive, you know, like utility patent, $15,000. Let's say the supplier's got a mold charge of like $10,000. Your purchase order value is like $20,000. And you're like, wait, I've spent all this money and I've not even like sold a single product yet. So you can also patent your product. You can get a provisional patent, which I think is like $100. And that kind of like just sets like a marker that we're going to be patenting this product. It's kind of like your first to file process. And then once the product takes off and you're like, oh, hey, like in our first month, we sold like 5,000 units, then go and file that patent, if you know what I mean. Or your other option is that it doesn't need to be Amazon or Shopify. You could launch on crowdfunding, where you get your sample, you reveal your product idea on Indiegogo and Kickstarter, then you get funding from the community before you pay for your production and your molds and things like that. And then you use that to pay for your patent.
Amazing. So such a detailed answer, and it's so good to hear. From especially, I think there's a massive misconception there where like there is ways of getting around it. I've heard you speak about the Italian thing, and you know, being from Italy, being born there, made in Italy is still one of the biggest names, I would say, where it's all about quality, right? It really shows made in Italy means quality leather product, quality fashion products. And I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I think around 20 years ago, when I, for example, where we were both like growing up, I think there was a bit of a judgment towards like Chinese made products, where it was actually made in China was that cheaper, you know, cheaper made, cheaper quality type of product. However, I think that a misconception now because there's been a massive movement towards quality, due probably to the competition there is out there for manufacturing anyway. But how have you seen that over your experience, that change in China?
Yeah, for sure. I always say that you can get whatever you want made in China. Like if you want a $1 product, you can get it. If you want a $10 product, you can get it. And it's just because they're capable of making anything, like literally. So it's really just what are the instructions, what are the standards that you set for your brand, like what are the quality control measures. We talked a lot about, inspections, sample process, certifications, and we are setting standards. But if we bypass all of that, then we can get really, really cheap products. And by the way, certain markets, that's what they demand. Like, if you go to like Primark and you can get like a $1 pair of socks or whatever, like they require cheap products. So there's factories set up for that. But if you go to like the North Face store and they have like £30 socks, right? Then there are factories set up for making those standards as well. So the instructions that you set for the factory is what the quality is that you're going to receive. Now, what I've seen in terms of being in China since like 2010 until today, 2023, when we're recording this podcast, I'm not sure when it's going to be published, but what I've seen is a massive growth, right? And it's been a massive growth in their middle class. And how that's impacted the factory was that, like traditionally, before my time, like 20 years ago, China's labor source was working in factories to be like the factory for the world. But because they have this growth in middle class, a growth in people's disposable income, now all of a sudden they desire like Western goods, nightclubs, restaurants, KFC, Starbucks, Pizza Hut, cinemas, all that stuff. So now like that younger generation workforce is like, why on earth would I work in a factory when I can go work in Starbucks and play on my phone and make friends and make cool coffees and become a barista, then work in a factory, work really, really hard for like a similar salary. So what's happened is that when I used to go to China in 2010, I would like literally get off the plane at like the major cities, like the port cities, like, Shanghai and places like that. And you just have a short trip into the factories. Now, when you arrive in those like cities, you've got like a 4-hour high-speed rail journey inland because the factories are moving like more and more rural because the big cities are now doing those like sort of more middle-class type businesses. And then like the factories are moving more and more inland. And then the factory workers have also got like, it's an aging population, right? Like when I go into factories, like nowadays, it's all like an older workforce, like 40, 50, 60 years old, because the younger generations are just not coming through. And that's why they're investing a lot in, AI and things like that and robot technology. But they're also, China are investing in other countries as well. They tried it in Africa a while ago. It didn't necessarily work so well. That's a long story. But they've also invested in other countries as well, like Myanmar, Bangladesh, Philippines. And I'm seeing it more and more now. Like when I go to talk to factories or when I go to exhibitions, they say, hey, we've got our China factory, but we also have a factory in Myanmar. We also have a factory in Bangladesh. We also have a factory in Philippines. And they're like taking their production lines, their expertise, and they're building infrastructure in those countries so that they can supply the rest of the world still under their sort of guidance and leadership, but at a lower production cost, lower labor cost, and sort of lower infrastructure cost as well.
Amazing. Such a good point. With the delivery side of things from China, we have a whole episode with Mark from Casa Global Logistics, and he covers that quite a lot. So what I really wanted to shift is to Kian Golzari, the expert and advisor, right? So we have looked at the whole the sourcing journey and in a very nitty-gritty way. I personally have a master's in innovation and entrepreneurship. So, and this whole episode has been about how to implement your next big idea. I've actually personally introduced young entrepreneurs, new businesses to your content simply because of the way you portray yourself as well. If there is a piece of advice that you would give to anyone designing a new product that hasn't been finalized yet, what would that be in that implementation state of that idea?
So I would say you have to really learn by doing, right? And you have to make your mistakes early, but make your mistakes cheaply and make your mistakes fast, because you will make mistakes in this game. Like I've made hundreds of mistakes, but I've learned from them, right? And essentially what I mean by make your mistakes like cheaply is that everyone has got a big idea. Everyone's got an idea which is going to change the world, which is a $1 million idea, but it's most likely going to be an innovative and expensive product to develop. I wouldn't necessarily want that to be my first go at manufacturing in China to do this big, expensive product, because I don't want the mistakes that I make to then be to the detriment of this great product idea. Now, there's all different types of ways. We can learn about entrepreneurship and study it, and watch YouTube content and about supply chain and all that sort of stuff. But nothing quite prepares you for actually just doing it yourself. So when I say like make your mistakes cheaply, I would say that my first product, I would want it to be a very, very low value item if I'm doing it for the first time, right? So, or seek the mentorship and expertise of someone who's done it before and get them to guide you. But let's just say, for example, I'm ordering for the first time, I would do a very, very cheap product, like an iPhone case, $1. Let's say your MOQ is 1,000 units. My total investment into learning supply chain is $1,000. Now you could spend $1,000 on a holiday, on a night out for some people, but I'm actually going to really fast track my learning and all the stuff that we talked about in terms of like selecting the supplier and arranging samples, arranging inspection, arranging shipment, all that sort of stuff. I've learned, and now when I feel happy with myself of, hey, I actually did that pretty well, I'm happy with everything, I didn't make too many mistakes, now let's go for that big idea, now let's go for like that advanced product development, let's seek investment, let's go into that big product idea, let's set up molds, let's do our crowdfunding campaign. But I would really want to make sure that I'm comfortable and I'm good at supply chain before sort of investing big, because I've seen mistakes happen, I've seen quality problems happen, I've seen failed inspections, and I've seen people invest their life savings into a product and it failed, not because the product wasn't good, but because they didn't have the right guidance with their product development, with their supplier selection, and with their supply chain.
Yeah, there's one particular thing that I've seen you say that I really like on the overproducing, where, sometimes it's about taking risks, especially as a business. It's all about risk, right? So when you're developing a product, making it that to the 70% of its ability, it's actually an advantage, because someone else might copy it, someone else might see it and grab inspiration. Whilst you've launched something at 70%, you're now developing the next 10% and get it to 100%, which I thought was a brilliant point, because I think I know people that are so, perfectionism is a human character, it's any human value. However, in business, it's not necessarily a good thing, because you miss out the train, you miss the train that's going and has the possibility for you to really become a profitable business. So yeah, I thought that was a really, really good point. In actually, it's all about learning from your mistakes. So make the mistakes, learn from them, and then keep going.
Yeah, you nailed it with that analogy in terms of like, I think when I mentioned it, I said like develop until 80% ready, but it can be 70%, 80%. And that's essentially like, if you've got a new product idea, as perfectionists, we can get a product to what we think is like 80% completion pretty quickly, right? A couple of months samples, all that. Yeah. But getting it from 80 to 100, and I've been guilty of this before, I've spent like a couple of years on a product before. You're killing yourself to get from that 80 to 100. But actually, once you get it to that 100, the window of opportunity is now passed. Like, other people have come into the market, they've made similar products, and now you have this perfect product, and you're like, wait, this market's already been established. So I would say like launch when you're 80% ready, and then when people try to copy your product, they're copying what you already have out in the marketplace. But in the background, behind the scenes, you're working on getting it from 80 to 100. So when people have launched their iteration of your product, you're now relaunching your new innovative product. So you're always going to be one step ahead of the competition. So whenever you launch something, don't wait until like a year before you're like, okay, we should probably develop on top of that. You have to constantly innovate to constantly stay on top of the market, stay on top of the competition.
Yeah, it's the answer what I wanted to hear. As I said, I have a master's in innovation. It's exactly the answer I wanted to hear. It's what I studied for, so that's really good. Hey, let's go back to you. I really appreciate all your knowledge and the way you portray yourself. I was, laughing and joking around before this podcast on how I'm going to try and catch you out. I have never had a hope of actually doing that, because you portray yourself so well. But I was intrigued, because I don't know if I've not seen the content behind this, or I think you mentioned a couple of things, but I really wanted to know, what was the first product that you produced yourself, and how would you kind of, if there's any change to be made, or how would you improve it now?
Yeah, great question. I am honestly, like, I can't take credit for this, because I had such great like mentorship. Like, I went into a family business where they had systems and procedures already, and I learned so much from my dad. But my first product was that backpack, and I was just so lucky that the backpack was the first product, because that's very, very intricate, like requires many different parts and components and things like that. Whereas if the first product I developed was like just something simple, like an iPhone case where you just fill it with plastic or something, maybe I wouldn't have had that interest in that curiosity. I wouldn't change anything, because obviously I've learned a lot from it, rightly or wrongly, if I made mistakes. And I would say that like I'm very, very lucky where I am today, but I've learned those from stacking up mistakes and learning from them. But the only advice I can give is just don't make the same mistake twice. Like, and you can really, really fast track your learning by going to the source, by going to China, by building those relationships, by seeing how products are made firsthand. And I just can't emphasize that enough, that like, you know, when you get started, you know, it's a side hustle, you want to do it online, you want to do it as like efficiently as possible. But when you feel like this is actually a business now, this has got big potential, this is growth, you really have to get yourself either to China or to the place of your manufacturing to really take your product development, your knowledge, your expertise, your skills, your relationships to the next level.
Amazing. Yeah. I know it was a tough question to ask because, well, actually, from what you've been saying, it's not about improving what you did a few years ago. It's about learning from it and making something completely different or as innovative as possible, which is great. Now,
But
there was this,
yeah. I was going to say one other thing is that like, luckily now, like we have so many resources that we can learn from, whether it be like events, you know, that you guys put on, listening to this podcast, watching YouTube channels, like paying for masterminds. Whereas like when I started, I didn't have that. Like, and I spent a lot of time alone in China as well. So I would say that like you have to make a deal with yourself that you're going to commit to this, right? So for example, when I went to China for the first time, I moved there by myself. I didn't have any friends. I like literally just got an apartment in an area. I had no idea where it was. I didn't speak the language. I dropped my bags, just went to the first bar, made some friends, then like, you know, started going to factories, becoming friends with factory bosses. But like entrepreneurship, as you know, is a long, lonely, tiresome game. So like before you get started on this journey, like you have to kind of make a deal with yourself to be like, right, I'm going to give myself a year, 2 years. I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to commit to 3 product launches, and I'm going to give it everything I've got. And it's like, I think a few years ago, you heard stories of people being successful to be like, yeah, this is my side hustle. This made like 7 figures. Like nowadays, I think the market has shifted so much that you really have to commit. Like you really have to commit everything you have to being successful in a product launch. And you can certainly do it. It's definitely within your capabilities. We can solve problems through products, but you have to have a certain element of discipline and commitment and make a deal with yourself.
I'm so glad that you said that, because my very next point was an Instagram post that you posted around a week ago. Okay. And it's all about having values over goals.
Oh yeah.
What do you mean by that? I really want to know that.
Yeah, so I have like my core values as a person, and then a lot of people have like your core values as a business as well. And this goes like for all aspects of life, you know, not just like product development and things like that. And like, I'm very passionate on goals as well. I do set a lot of goals for myself as well. But I think that like the values that you set for yourself, and I think it's very, very important for everyone to write down what your values are. Like on one of those things, I wrote loyalty, harmony, and high performance are my 3 core pillars. And whenever I see that from someone else, when I'm like, this is a high performance person, this is a loyal person. And by harmony, I just mean that like being very, very at peace, at one with what you do and your message and who you are as a person. Whenever I see that in other people, like those are the people that I align with, I get on really well with. And it's very, very important to, like I said, make a deal with yourself in terms of who you are, what are your beliefs, what do you value in life? And then kind of like the law of attraction, when you see other products, businesses, people with those similar values, that's what then attracts you to those types of people. And that's where I've seen the biggest needle shifters, the biggest amount of growth is like aligning with people which fit your values, rather than, okay, I'm just going to set this crazy goal, I'm going to put my head down, be very, very disciplined and just be introverted self and just work on this. That works as well. But I feel that like being a value orientated person, writing down core values for your business as well. Like, you know, we talked about, you know, selecting the right suppliers. Like if one of our core values is like quality, then aligning with the right certificates. If it's sustainability, see who's got sustainable materials. But you have to know what your values are of a person first before you can, and of a brand first, before you can line up with the right suppliers, before then you can create other business opportunities for yourself as well.
That's perfect. That's a great answer. We finally go into the final section, and you know, we are going to put the picture up of the Instagram post. Well, what I'm talking about anyway. But I've requested from all guests for the Online Hustle podcast a photo of yourself from 10 years ago, because the final section is called Believe It or Not. Believe it or not, 10 years ago was the year 2013. It might show our age, but 2013 feels like yesterday, right? There is the particular question. There's a picture of you with a very famous DJ now called Joel Corey, and you are at an NBA game. First of all, what were you doing there 10 years ago? And secondly, if there's one piece of advice you would give that Kian Golzari in the year 2013, what would it be? And it cannot be investing in crypto, because that's something.
Oh man, that's a great point. Yeah, so Joel and I are really good friends. So we were both exchange students at University of Miami. So we met there, and we just stayed really good friends to this day. And I admire Joel so much because like I've known him for like 13, 14 years now, and I look up to him so much because I know how hard he's worked. And I've actually I interviewed Joel on my YouTube channel. So if anyone's interested, you can go to Sourcing with Kian YouTube channel. And I interviewed Joel when he was here in Dubai, and we get a lot into his mindset. But I've seen him work so hard as a DJ, like putting out his own music and doing all the gigs and all his resorts all over Europe, like making no money, like putting so much money into it himself, doing like gigs at venues like all over like the UK and like literally till 3 o'clock in the morning, and then like next morning getting a Ryanair, EasyJet flight, other parts. And I'm just watching this on like Instagram stories for years. And then all of a sudden, like he popped off in 2020 during COVID with his single Head and Heart that went straight to #1. And I've never been more proud for someone because I saw how hard he worked for 10 years to get to that moment. But someone might, hear that song and be like, oh, this is sick, like overnight success. But like there was so much work that went on behind the scenes. And there's also like a similar journey to myself in like product development. And so I really, really admire people which work really, really hard for a long time because I feel that you're always going to make it if you have a vision, if you have a purpose, if you have values and you commit to what you want to do. Some people might make it in 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, or some people might even be 10 years, but you're definitely going to make it. And I think just having that grit, that determination and those values. But we were at an NBA game, like we go back to Miami every now and then, and we just caught a game there, which was a lot of fun. And the advice I would give to myself from 10 years ago is that like kind of what I just said is that like it's going to work out, because like that uncertainty of like it is what drives you. Like you're just so desperate to make it, to do what you said that you're going to do. But I actually feel that like actually that might be bad advice, because if you know you're going to make it, then you're going to take your foot off the gas. But it's that grit and that discipline of I want to prove everyone wrong is what drives you. So yeah, maybe the crypto was a better
I know. I've made the whole section make sure that you don't say crypto, because it's just an easy to get out answer. But I appreciate that. There's not many. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, but I would say that like I probably subconsciously knew it at the time, but it wasn't obvious. But it was aligning with this people of your values, right? So like I said, Joe was working his ass off for 10 years before he got famous and popular. And same with myself in China by myself. Like, dude, I've stayed in like hotels in China in villages where there's been cockroaches on the wall, like just stuff that, and you can't explain that to your friends when you come back home. And there's no like cool story to tell there, but there's certain things that you just have to put up with. So really just, because people see like, the 5-star hotels, the nice flights, the cool products, but not knowing what you went through to get there. And I just feel that like you have to really just accept that there's going to be very, very hard times, and you just have to get on with it. And then that's when the best fruits of your labor will appear at the end of that.
Amazing. Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. Yeah, there's hard graft behind of all the success that you're seeing now, which is really, really good to see. Yeah, I mean, there's not many people that I find, I don't know, so listenable, and at the same time so inspiring, as you do. You are so good at making a good point and being so detailed, being meticulous, which is exactly why we invited you to be on this podcast. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Final bit is, how can anyone aspiring or thinking about doing what you do can get in touch with you, or how can your course and your YouTube channel is something that I recommend everyone. So how can they get in contact with you?
Oh yeah, thanks very much. You're also a great interviewer as well. You've clearly done your research as well.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to hear.
and similar to like what we talked about as with like values as well. When we met in Milan, like all the values that we kind of talked about, I could definitely see that in you as well, and that's why we got on so well from day one. So credit to you as well. But if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm quite active on Instagram. I'm Kian_JG. Also, if you want some education on supply chain and things like that, there's a YouTube channel, Sourcing with Kian, and a Facebook group of the same name. I also made a couple of courses. I partnered with Founder, and that's available as well. If you just go to, you'll see it through my YouTube channel as well. But that's if you want.
I mean, all the links and all the descriptions will be below on the YouTube channel as well. But for our listeners, please follow Kian. He's an incredibly inspirational guy. So some of his stories are quite good. That Instagram post honestly just inspired me so much. And I think so many people concentrate on their goals so much and are so driven, but you've got to stick to your values and believing in those, and those are kind of going to correlate to your goals. And I thought that was really, really good. I like that you have it printed though. Yeah. That was the main thing, where you can think about your goals, you can write them down, but the fact that you had a whole printed canvas with it, I thought that was really inspirational, which I'm planning on doing. I'm writing down mine now soon, and I'm sure I'll make an Instagram.
Please share it with me once you have it.
Hey, I will do. Thank you so much. Please get in touch with Kian as well. Follow him everywhere if you can, because he's come up with such good content, and I've learned so much through you and through this episode as well. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Online Hustle Podcast. We hope you found the conversation insightful and inspiring. If you'd like to connect with our guests or learn more about their work, you can find their contact details in the episode description below. Stay in the loop with us, following us at the Online Hustle Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. And remember, if you're looking for an expert guidance on e-commerce or have questions for our strategy and growth team, you can reach out to us via our website at strategy.avarsgroup.com or drop us a simple email at strategy@avarsgroup.com. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes where we continue to unravel the strategies that drive online success.